Hey everyone, and welcome to another video. Tonight we have 2 hours of horror stories. I hope you all enjoy them. We are doing something a little bit different for this video. I get a lot of comments from people saying that they use my content to fall asleep, or from truckers who are on the road, and I get a lot of comments from people saying that they do not enjoy the ads. I personally don't either, so I thought for this one we could test it out, see how it goes. There are no mid-roll ads whatsoever. Again, this is just a test to see how it goes, what happens with it, so on and so forth. So if you do enjoy this, please be sure to drop a like rating. It takes just a quick second, and it supports the content. It helps more people see it. Sharing it around, also, of course, very appreciated. Subscribing if you are new. I post content just like this all the time. Anyways, sit back, do whatever it is that you do to relax. Enjoy this no ad content. And as always, I hope you all have a great night. Growing up, I always heard the same warning. Don't go out late. It's not safe. Especially if you're a girl. I heard it from my parents, aunties, even older girls in the neighborhood, and they weren't joking. They said it like they knew something. They'd say, being outside too late is already bad, but being a girl, it makes it worse. They never really explained what worse meant. Sometimes it sounded like crime, other times something else. But I listened. I stayed in. I wasn't trying to find out what they meant. Then I left home for university. Everything felt different. Here, people went out late all the time, like it was normal. Girls, guys. They'd go clubbing, partying, walking the streets at midnight like it was nothing. Nothing bad seemed to happen. I started to think maybe all those warnings were just fear talking, old habits from people who grew up in different times. So when my friends invited me to celebrate after exams a night out, just to relax, I said yes. That night still haunts me. There were 5 of us, Rena, Amina, Joe, and Faye. We didn't even go far, just a lounge near campus. We danced a little, ate, took pictures, laughed. It was the first time in weeks we felt light. We left around 2 a.m. It was late, we knew, but we weren't drunk or careless, just tired and ready to go back. That's when we noticed them. At first it didn't seem like anything. Just 3 guys walking behind us. The street was mostly empty, so we could hear everything except we didn't hear them. No footsteps, no voices, just presence. Rena glanced back and slowed her steps. "Guys," she said quietly, "don't panic, but I think those guys are following us." We brushed it off. They're probably just going our way. But when we turned right, so did they. We crossed the street. They crossed too. Now we were panicking, even if no one said it out loud. We walked faster, then started to jog. We turned down a shortcut alley to lose them. That's when we saw 2 more men at the other end. They weren't moving, just standing. One of them had his head tilted back like he was sniffing the air. That's when it clicked. This wasn't just guys being creepy. This was something else. We turned to head back, and the original 3 were already at the entrance of the alley, still silent, still watching. Then one of them raised his hand. He had something long and shiny. It wasn't a knife. It looked like a saw. I've never screamed that loud in my life. We all did, screaming, begging, calling for help, and then out of nowhere, "Hey, what's going on there?" A flashlight, a voice. A man in a police uniform walked up. We ran to him, shaking, sobbing, explaining. But when we turned to point at the men, they were gone. Not walking away, not hiding, just gone. The officer didn't seem to believe us, said we probably just imagined it, or that maybe someone was trying to mess with us. But he gave us a ride back to campus. He told us again, this is why it's not safe to be out late. That should have been the end of it, but it wasn't. When I got back to the hostel, Rena stayed over in my room because we were too scared to sleep alone. We locked the door, locked it with a chair. I closed my curtain, but not fully, just enough to peek out. And I swear on everything, they were there. 3 figures, right across the street, standing still, watching. Not moving, not saying anything, just watching. I called Rena over. She saw them too. We shut the curtain, turned on the lights, and sat up till morning. The next day we all met up and talked. Every single one of us saw them that night, from our different rooms, different buildings. They were outside watching. We made a silent agreement after that. No more going out late, no matter what. Even now, if it's getting dark and I'm walking home, I feel it. That prickly feeling in the back of my neck, like I'm being followed, like I'm being watched. I should have listened. They were right. I left Rungsville when I got married. I was 18 at the time, way too young and dumb to make a decision of that significance. But I have never regretted putting that place behind me. Alas, I could have chosen a better runaway partner, but in fairness, I did mention that I was afflicted with being dumb as a bag of rocks. Brent, my high school sweetheart at the time, was raring to go after what happened to his sister. And I was sick and tired of the air, the incidents, the curfews. Brent and I had a good couple of years, some okay years, and then some not so okay years. I could handle the bills, the crap pay, the dingy apartments, and even the affairs, but I couldn't handle the drinking and the beatings. Whiskey was his favorite mistress. He never truly got over it. We made it out of Rungsville, but what happened to Andrea hung over him like a dark veil of misery stapled to his side at all times. The drinking dulled the pain somewhat, so I still can't bring myself to blame him or hate him completely. She was only 12 years old when it happened. But for the sake of our 2 children, I had to leave yet another dangerous place and got a divorce. It was messy, but I managed full custody. I turned my life around, got a good paying job, a nice roof over our heads, and I could call myself content for the first time in, well, for the first time. All that changed when I got the call from my mother, urging me to come back home. My brother had died. They labeled it a hunting accident, but everyone knows what that really means down at the Ville. So, against my better judgment, I loaded the kids into my old Toyota and got on the road heading home. 6 hours flew by. Despite the occasional hissy fits and the fruits of the womb's supernatural ability to get under each other's skins, I was too deep into my own thoughts and memories to really care about the constant bickering. "Mom, Eric won't stop kicking my chair," whined Samantha, my oldest, from the passenger seat. "Shut up. If you don't want to get kicked, move your stupid seat," snapped back Eric from the back seat. "I am stuck here with the bags and you keep reclining and I can't stretch my legs." "Ugh, you're a little worm. It's not like you need that much space," replied Samantha with a little evil smirk, knowing she was pressing a sensitive subject, leaving me no room but to intervene. "Both of you behave," I yelled. "Sam, don't make fun of your brother, and move your seat forward. Eric, stop kicking your sister. We both know that if it wasn't the seat, you'd find something else to kick her over." Both of them grumbled in annoyed agreement. Samantha moved her seat forward about 1/8 of the diameter of a single strand of hair. Small victories. Gotta take those when you can. "Why do we have to go to this thing, Mom?" Eric asked. "It's not like we knew Uncle Kevin." "Well, you didn't know him, kiddo, but I did, and Grandma asked me to come," I replied. "Trust me, I would have dropped you two with someone and spared you the misery of the trip, but no one was available and the kennels were all full for the weekend." I shot a smirk at him and he smiled. Samantha rolled her eyes. It was becoming a growing trend in our house. She might not believe me, but I was her age once, also filled to the brim with the edgy adolescence that makes annoyance the automatic response to everything. Though, even back then, me and my brother Kevin were very close. Mom and Dad usually worked late down at the store, and he was the one that regularly made sure I got home okay and before nightfall. I might have bickered, but I never resented him for it. Besides, him being my big brother and me loving him, my room faced the woods. I had heard the incessant crying, the price to pay. We were getting closer to town, already on the descent. Driving down the top of the hill, I could see Rungsville from above. It was a pretty sight. Rungsville was an affluent place, well taken care of, definitely picturesque. Sprawling gardens adorned with fancy-looking fountains and marble statues. Pearly white buildings as far as the eye can see. A picture of the Ville wouldn't look out of place as the backdrop to one of those propaganda pieces from the 50s depicting the American dream. As we made our way down, we were suddenly surrounded by the trees. A growing feeling had begun in my stomach ever since we passed the sign indicating that we were in the outskirts of town. It had crept up, inflating like a balloon as we made our descent. Now it was on my chest, restricting my lungs, making it difficult to get a breath in and out. Images of my brother came to me, his warm smile, his tight embrace every time I safely made it back home. Flashes of those nights I crept into his room, crying more often than not because the sounds outside made it hard to fall asleep. I tried not to let my imagination run loose, but I couldn't help but think of his final moments. My mother refused to tell me any details. I keep picturing him by himself, the trees closing in, all alone, until he wasn't. The morbid picture show I had conjured in my head came to a sudden stop when I realized Samantha had rolled down her window all the way. Her arm was out of the car, making waves in the air. My heart sank to my stomach. Samantha, honey, please roll your window up. You can turn on the AC. I tried, attempting not to let the panic reach my voice. What? Ugh, Mom, no. She started. There's freaking fresh air outside. I couldn't keep it bottled any longer. Baby, please. Please don't do this. Close the window. Keep your arms inside. I shrieked, hearing something shift somewhere deep in the trees. Branches shattering, leaves rustling violently. Mom, what the hell? Look at the road. I'm just cooling myself off. I started breaking while attempting to plead, desperately, but only a series of wheezy noises escaped my progressively tightening ribcage. Mom? A small voice rose from the back. It was Eric. He was staring out his window. I only caught it for a split second, but he seemed confused and scared. That's when I heard my daughter scream. Something had caught her arm. I stepped hard on the brake as I felt something wet hit my face in a jet. It was coming from the passenger window. Wrapped around my daughter's arm, I saw rows of putrid, brown-tinged teeth. I saw how the pale, white flesh contorted under the tension of the vice around it, the lines of tension giving way to highways of torn shreds, pulsating and gurgling in a violent spew of my own flesh and blood. The car came to a violent stop, knocking my head against the windshield. My senses returned just in time to hear shouting. Panic had filled the car. I felt a warm river overflowing on my scalp, the blood making it hard to see out of my left eye. Mom, oh God, Mom, Sam's out of the car. The shouting was coming from Eric. He was shrieking, banging his hands desperately on the glass. I turned my head toward the passenger seat. Empty. Where my daughter had sat, there was only a pool of gore. Looking out of the passenger window, I saw it. A sack of lumpy meat and a vaguely humanoid drape of skin sat on the ground. Its back was facing me, but I could see its bald head bobbling reverently. Its body was too thin, Irregularly placed patches of dirty, wire-thin hair covered its body and gangly limbs, crooked at the joints. The bobbing stopped, its meal interrupted by my son's bloody shrieks. It turned rapidly. Its mouth was a mess of sagging skin hiding an abyss of crooked razor blades. I saw her hair, her pretty blonde hair, caught in between them. I wanted to cry out in horror. I wanted to yell. I wanted to get out of the car and do something. I couldn't, and the reason was that the beast's black, beady eyes weren't aimed at me. They were fixed on Eric. I put the car in drive and I floored it. I did not look at the rearview mirror. I did not listen to Eric's shouts and pleas to turn the car around as they morphed into wails of gut-wrenching grief. I focused on not veering off the road as I stepped on the pedal, only breaking focus slightly to roll the passenger window up. I worked for a while as a technical analyst at a company not open to the public. Our goal? To develop a neural simulation technology capable of condensing an entire lifetime into just a few minutes. We called it total immersion. The individual was connected to an augmented reality system so advanced they couldn't distinguish what was real from what was programmed. The promise was simple: to acquire knowledge, maturity, and emotional balance through simulated decades, love loss, growth, purpose, and then return to reality with all of it recorded in the mind. The process, in theory, was straightforward. They sought willing testers, criminals, death row inmates, volunteers desperate for money. They were placed in capsules and connected to the system via special augmented reality goggles. The experiment rarely lasted more than 30 minutes, except for rare cases. But inside they lived a whole life. Births, adolescence, love, loss, sometimes children, sometimes wars, always an end. And then they woke up. The problem? Most of the test subjects didn't react well. They went insane, out of their minds, and screamed. Screamed a lot. Sometimes they didn't even recognize their own voice. They would tremble uncontrollably, crying desperately. They blamed us for destroying everything they had lived through. We were called monsters, more times than I can remember. They lost everything they had gained in the experiment, and the worst part was returning to reality. There was no escape, only an empty world where nothing made sense. Many were disturbed and tried to attack the scientists. Unfortunately, we had several losses, but the experiments had to continue. I remember the case of a woman. She cried for hours, calling out her son's name. The problem was that son never existed. The most disturbing part is that she had a real son, outside the simulation, but she never mentioned him once. She preferred the one from the artificial reality, due to some code flaw, or perhaps some unintended cruelty within the algorithm itself. Some test subjects didn't live just one simulated existence. They lived dozens, each memory a fresh wound, each existence an unbearable weight. This explains why so many didn't survive the end of the experiment. The shock was too much. They returned as if they had lived for centuries, and in a way they had. After we discovered the flaw, they tried to cover it up. They called it an unforeseen side effect. They said they would update the system, that new tests were on the way, that future subjects would be monitored more closely. The experiment would only be a success when the test subjects came out sane and absorbed the knowledge. As long as they kept breaking down or dying, the experiment was still flawed, and it would continue until success. After working there for so long, it started to affect me, so for several reasons I resigned. Before leaving, I saw a new file on the coordinator's desk. It was an 11-year-old boy. Child test. First full life simulation. They are going to do to him what they did to the others. He will live, love, lose, and then wake up alone, with his brain screaming for a life that never existed. I don't remember my mother ever being sane. From the very moment I was born, the house I lived in was filled with her madness. The tattered curtains that were never washed, the constantly running TV with all sorts of religious broadcasts, the silence that followed her nightly sobbing. But most of all, I was terrified of the icon of the Virgin Mary cracked in places, and I swear, I felt her watching me. My mother always smelled of alcohol, from early morning till late at night. I never saw my father, and whenever I asked about him, she answered with absolute certainty that my father was an angel. Not in the sense of being a good man, but literally a real angel. She said it with wide open, yet utterly empty and lifeless eyes. A cigarette dangled from her cracked lips as she repeated, "Your father is an angel, Michael. A real angel." I believed her. Maybe when I was 5. I was happy and rushed to tell my friends who my father was. The reaction was predictable. They mocked me and teased me for years. No matter how many times my mother repeated her story about my father, no matter how many religious channels she made me watch, I stopped believing her. In my teenage years, it got worse. I was hot-tempered, stubborn, and had a terrible relationship with my mother. I openly called her crazy and begged her to tell me the truth about my father. But instead, in one of her drunken episodes, she screamed that my father was an angel, holding a cracked rosary in her hand, as if she could summon him from the heavens. He burned with light when he came to me, and you... She would grab my face roughly, scratching my cheeks and chin with her nails. "You carry his sacred blood." Eventually, I stopped listening to her at all, let alone speaking to her. At 18, I moved to another city and fulfilled my dream to escape the rotting house with its perpetually yellow lighting and peeling walls, and my deranged mother. Because of her, people called me crazy, mocked me about my father, and openly insulted her, which often got me into fights. My only fond memory with her is of a day we went to the beach. She held my hand, and we simply watched the sea. Everything was fine until she looked up at the sky and said, "When will you come, my love?" After moving out, I worked hard, made new friends, real, good friends. Whenever they asked about my family, I said I was an orphan. I even started drinking a little, just to understand her, but not become her. I should note that I was a firm atheist, unlike my mother's fanatical religiosity. But I'm not writing to tell you how I ran away from home and my insane mother. I'm writing to tell you how I came back. After I moved out, I felt something watching me. I chalked it up to stress, even went to a psychologist, but that strange feeling never left, like something was protecting me. Once a car nearly hit me, but I managed to jump away just in time. Another time, I stopped walking without knowing why, and a second later, a massive branch fell from a tree that could have easily crushed my skull. One night, she left me 11 voice messages. Some were just sobs that turned into screams. Others were drunken mumblings. But the last message, sent half an hour after the others, made my skin crawl. My mother's voice was low and barely audible, as if she were hiding somewhere. "He's coming for you. Your father. He came specifically for you." I couldn't take my eyes off the phone. I couldn't even move. I had cut off all contact with her for a year. Maybe 2. I lost count. The next morning, I got a call from the hospital. They said my mother had been admitted to the psychiatric ward, and I barely held back laughter. Not because it was funny, it wasn't, but because it was inevitable. The nurse who called said, "We need you to come and collect her things. At the house, we found something strange." Very reluctantly, I returned to that same house, still reeking of damp wood and despair, just like before. Her belongings were packed into a clear plastic container. There were old photographs where she was still young and beautiful, smiling sincerely, a smile I never saw on her again. There were other items, but two stood out to me: a worn, large journal and a massive black feather, thick and strange. She had kept both on a little shelf above her bed. Besides that, the walls of her room were covered with bizarre symbols, written in chalk and ash, but most striking of all was a figure with wings and outstretched arms, apparently drawn in blood. I never saw any of this as a child. My knees trembled when the nurse told me that all of the symbols and the figure had been hidden behind furniture and posters. I barely managed to sleep and woke up from the cold. The window was open, though I clearly remembered closing all the windows. There were claw marks on the windowsill. Everything inside me clenched. My breath caught. And for the first time, I began to consider my mother's words. When I lay on the bed, I couldn't sleep because of scratching noises in the guest room. They weren't rats. The sound was rhythmic and deliberate, like someone was carving something. I didn't sleep a wink until morning. The sounds and the smell of her clothes in the air transported me back to childhood, when I curled up, terrified by a thunderstorm. Back then she told me nothing would happen to me because my father would always be with me. I knew all the answers were in the journal. When I picked it up, it felt like it burned my hands. And yet I started reading. It began innocently enough. Notes about my birth, how she cried the first time she saw me, that my eyes reminded her of his. She never mentioned his name. Then things got much stranger. Somewhere between love letters to my father, praises of his divine beauty, and descriptions of strange and horrifying rituals on how to summon angels. He came to me again, said he would take our son, despite saying before he wouldn't. He said he loves only me, and I should ascend with him. The neighbors saw him, heard him in the attic. No one talks to me anymore. They know who fathered my child. He said he'll come for our son soon, that the time has come. How could he do this? He promised I would go instead of our son. The last entry read, "I won't let him take our son. I'll do everything to stop him." I slammed the journal shut, fighting back nausea. My hands trembled with fear. I dropped everything and left the house. That night I dreamed of wings, not like the angel wings from Sunday school books, but huge and broken, with coal-like tips and golden roots. A distorted, wrong voice repeated my name. Michael. I woke to the sound of feathers sliding across the floor, but there were no feathers, only rising dust, and a smell like freshly cut grass and burning meat. The dreams continued, each time with more detail, not just wings now, but a tall, gaunt figure with outstretched arms. It was always still. Its eyes glowed in the dark, and its voice said my name like it belonged to him. Electrical malfunctions began. Objects moved by themselves. Deep claw marks appeared on the walls. The TV turned on to static at night, and blood would drip from my nose. I didn't know where to go or what to do, so I went to a priest. The old priest sat on a bench by the altar, bent over a prayer book. The moment I entered, he tensed, sensing I hadn't come to confess. "What brings you here, my son?" "I need an answer. I need to know what to do. If my father is an angel." The priest flinched like I struck him. He closed the prayer book and stood, his knees cracking. He stared at me like he was trying to see into my soul. Who told you that? My mother. He's been coming to me in dreams. I feel him watching me through mirrors. Wherever I go, I feel his gaze. I feel something changing inside me. I'm so scared, Father. He placed his hands on my shoulders. His hands were cold as gravestones. The angel you describe is not a messenger of love. He is ancient, more terrifying. Some of them were rejected even by God, and if one of them is your father... He didn't finish, just stepped back and crossed himself. You must reject him, renounce him, and never, ever summon or accept him. Don't look into his face if he appears. Such angels want to continue their lineage, but you will never be human again. In that moment, deep beneath my ribs, a thought stirred. Maybe I was never a human. The dreams became reality. When I blinked, feathers floated in the air. I turned suddenly and saw his face behind the curtain. Wide, frozen eyes staring. When I got the call that my mother died of cardiac arrest, a sharp mix of smells hit me. Burned feathers, meat, cinnamon, sulfur, and cut grass. He had been here. I heard my mother's voice. She sounded like she was laughing and crying at the same time. Michael, my beloved son, he's so proud of you. Your father finally took me with him. Don't be afraid, son. He'll take you too, and we'll finally live as a family. You'll have a more important role. Don't fear. Accept it. I love you. We love you. I vomited on my pants, paralyzed by terror. The smell didn't fade. It grew stronger. My first thought was that my father killed my mother and was trying to kill me too, using hallucinations. I tried to flee the house, but the TV turned on. The screens flickered, then static appeared. White noise, a chaotic swarm of dots. The static became rhythmic, like breathing, sometimes quiet, sometimes loud. Then the image changed. A silhouette emerged from the blur. At first, just an outline, then wings appeared just like in my dreams. Its head was tilted, face obscured by distorted light. It moved from inside the TV, coming closer with each frame. The screen lines warped as if he were pushing out, tearing through space. I stepped back, my heart pounding. Then, through the crackle of static, a distorted, inhuman voice said, "You are ready." The screen convulsed, and from its center a hand emerged, long clawed fingers, shimmering with both blinding light and shadow. The hand reached for me. I couldn't scream or move. I was frozen as he fully emerged, like a nightmare being born. He only vaguely resembled a man. His face was mine, but twisted. Terrifying, as the priest warned. He was corrupted by time and something unearthly, tall and thin, wrapped in wings that shimmered like metal. His voice sounded like wind across a grave. "We are one family again, Michael." I passed out. I don't know how much time passed. Hours, days maybe, but I woke up on the bathroom floor in a pool of my own blood. I coughed, spitting blood, and felt something pulsing under my skin. My blood was changing. When I looked in the mirror, my eyes no longer looked like mine. They were his. A few hours later, I felt excruciating pain in my back, like something trying to tear its way out. All food began to taste like ash. Later, I started hearing whispers of prayers in different languages from mirrors, pipes, and inside my own head, and always I heard my father's voice. "Michael, you were born for ascension. I existed before the great flood. My ancient blood flows in you. You will have many tasks, but you will succeed, because I am with you, always." I no longer needed sleep. My back slowly tore open as black stubs of wings bursted through the flesh. He came to me yesterday, showing burning skies and oceans of wings, a throne made of eyes. His voice sounded like a choir of thousands. He said he would teach me to walk between dimensions once the wings were fully grown. According to him, they will break free within 2 days. My skin peels and flakes like ash, and my teeth fall out immediately replaced by sharper ones. I no longer feel pain. I stopped praying for it to stop whenever I prayed. My tongue burned to ash and regrew. I stopped being afraid. The fear vanished on its own when I felt the air bend around me. I accepted it. I see other angels now like my father. They welcome me into their ranks. My mother stands among them, crying with joy. Now as I type this, I saw the future, where I shine with light like my father. I now stand in fire, and soon I will continue the bloodline. Amen. When I was a teenager, I lived in a small desert town. A tourist town, really. Think cowboy historic, with lots of old buildings and dust. I was able to make some extra cash babysitting on the weekends because there wasn't much else to do in the town anyways. One night I was babysitting for a couple that had an infant. I met them at Target. They seemed like a nice couple and knew of another family I sat for. They lived way out of town. So far out that street names are gone, and you use mile markers as your signs to know where you are. It was an easy gig. Baby was staying asleep. Just had to feed him when he woke up. Parents would be back around midnight. I cozied up on the couch with Netflix and settled in for a chill night, when the doorbell rang. Thinking it was one of the parents who forgot something, I jumped up and opened the door immediately. To nothing, it seemed. I shrugged and started to close the door when I heard a soft voice. "Miss?" I stopped the door and looked around the corner to see a girl standing on the steps to the porch. She was about my age, had long hair, and a hoodie pulled up, but her eyes, they were so light blue they were almost glowing in the dark. "Do you live at this house?" she had asked me. "Oh," I started. "No, I'm just visiting." I was careful not to say too much, because although the girl seemed harmless, she was still a stranger. "Is Mrs. Rosino home? I need to talk to her," she asked. She seemed nervous, twiddling her thumbs, looking behind me into the house. "You know what? She just stepped out to go to the store. I can tell her you stopped by, if you tell me your name," I said, slightly backing up, ready to close the door. She stepped towards me, eyes darting around, and she put her hand over the zipper on her hoodie. She leaned forward and whispered, "Please tell me where she is. I don't want to hurt you." My heart dropped. She removed her hand from the zipper and really looked at me, her eyes pleading. "I'm sorry, she really isn't here right now," I said with a tight expression. Her face turned desperate, but at that point I had been thoroughly creeped out, so I closed the door and locked it. I called the Rosinos to let them know. Once I described the girl, they grew frantic. They told me they were calling the police, and to stay with the baby. I still remember Mrs. Rosino screaming into the phone, "Don't leave my baby," over and over. I ran down the hall to the nursery, threw open the door and ran to the crib. The baby was sound asleep still. I scooped him up gently and sat in the rocker with him in one arm, my phone in the other. "Help will be here soon," I had whispered, more to comfort myself than anything. Then the banging started. I could hear the front door shake from the force used to knock on the wood. Then the sound moved. Why aren't there any sirens? The police station wasn't far from this area at all. right before you turned on the mile marker. They should be here by now. I heard the banging travel along the house, one big knock at a time. Bang. They were by the living room. Bang. They were by the kitchen. Bang. They were by the hallway. I got out my phone and texted 911 help to my mom. She knew where I was babysitting tonight. She responded immediately with question marks, then tried calling. I silenced the call. I couldn't risk answering and the intruders hearing me. My mom would make sure the police got her. I knew it. Slowly moving closer and closer to where I hid in the nursery, the window was locked tightly with the blinds closed. But glass is breakable. Bang. They were at the wall next to the window. I backed away from the window to the corner of the room when I heard the front door creak open. The baby boy still asleep in my arms. I started to cry. I whimpered, like a wounded puppy. I couldn't fight someone off while holding him, but I wasn't going to put him down. Footsteps descended the hallway. I heard muffled voices while doors were being opened and closed. "Where is the nursery?" a gruff voice asked. I don't know, Daddy. I couldn't see the floor plan online." The same small voice of the girl from earlier answered, "If that little girl wants to help them, that's fine, but he belongs to us. No one can keep him from us now." "Daddy, please. Maybe she will understand." The voices stopped right outside the door. The baby started to stir. I shushed him quietly and rocked him back and forth. Then I heard the sirens. I shot a thank you up to whoever was watching over me, grateful that this nightmare would be soon over. But the weirdest thing happened. The footsteps didn't retreat. No one ran, no one left. No one moved. I was sure they were going to come in and finish me off, right before the police showed up, and then steal the baby into the night. But that didn't happen either. Loud footsteps came walking through the house. A boisterous voice called out towards the hallway. "Excuse me, sir. Are you a resident here? We got a call that a little girl was in trouble. Is she her?" Muffled voices sounded and trailed off, walking outside. I was waiting to hear anything. Yelling, screaming, more sirens, but it was silent. After what seemed like hours, heavy footsteps walked directly down the hallway toward me, and the door opened. A uniformed officer looked stern, and took a look at me cowered in the corner with the Rosino baby. "Hey, sweetie, are you all right?" he asked, bending down to meet me at eye level. Yes, those people were trying to take the baby. They were going to kill me. Why did it take you so long to get here?" I cried out, finally letting the tears fall, as the adrenaline hit was coming down. The officer looked confused. "We came out the second the call came in. We made it here in about 5 minutes. Did you try to call in sooner?" He pulled his radio to his face, asking his other officer if any other calls were attempted. "Well, no, but the Rosinos called you at least 30 minutes ago. I called them first and they said they were calling you right away and to hide with the baby, so..." I looked down at baby Rosino. He had finally fully woken up and started to quietly cry. The officer just stared at me, a mix of sympathy and fear in his eyes. Where are his parents? They surely should be here by now. He's probably a little scared and needs his mom. Did you arrest those psychos? I patted his back and bounced him in my lap. To help comfort him, the officer smiled sadly at me and spoke into his radio. "You can send them in." After a few moments, the nursery door opened and the teenage girl stepped through, with a large man behind her. Oh, the girl started to sob, putting her hands up to cover her face. The older man placed his hand on her shoulder and looked at me sadly. The policeman stood and reached for the baby. "No," I shouted. "What are you doing? Are you working with them? This is the Rosino's son." The girl finally spoke. No, he isn't. He's mine. I don't know where else to put this. I've called 911. I've broken windows. I've tried staying awake all night, skipping town, everything. But every time the clock hits 8:43 p.m., I'm back at the beginning, on the porch of a quiet house in a cul-de-sac in Maple Hill, holding my backpack and a smile I don't mean. My name's Leah. I'm 19. I babysit to pay for school. Usually it's pretty normal. Movies, snacks, putting a kid to bed by 9. This time it's not normal. This time I think I'm trapped, and the kid knows it. Her name is Ellie. She's 6. Blonde, big eyes, little voice. She looks like she belongs in a toothpaste commercial. Her mom, Marissa, hired me off a local app for a last-minute babysitting job. One day only. Said she had a work trip she couldn't skip. Paid me in cash the second I stepped inside. She's been looking forward to this all week, Marissa said, already halfway out the door. She says today's going to be the best day ever. I remember that sentence too well now. I've heard it over 100 times. Ellie was already waiting at the top of the stairs that first morning. She looked at me like she'd met me before. Are you ready? She asked. I asked, ready for what? For the best day ever, she said, like it was obvious. It started small, a weird sense of déjà vu. The dog barked before I rang the bell. A breeze blew the exact same piece of paper off the table twice. Ellie started answering my questions before I asked them. Then I woke up on the porch again. Same morning, same clothes. Same words out of Marissa's mouth. Same look from Ellie. Are you ready? I thought maybe I dreamed the whole day. Maybe I was sick. But the loops kept coming. Over and over. Same date, same house, same kid. At first, Ellie pretended she didn't notice. But after a few loops, she started slipping up, calling me by name before I introduced myself, finishing my sentences, laughing at jokes I hadn't told yet. By the 5th loop I said, "You know what's happening, don't you?" She grinned. I just want it to be perfect. Perfect. Like I'd been getting it wrong this whole time. So I played along. I tried things. Took her to the park, got her ice cream, let her watch cartoons for hours. Every loop, something new. Sometimes she smiled, sometimes she frowned. But the day always ended the same way. Me tucking her in, thinking maybe this time I'd broken it. Then darkness. Then 7:58 a.m. Eventually she stopped pretending. One morning I woke up on the porch and she was standing outside waiting for me. "You're late," she said. "I'm 2 minutes early," I said. She looked past me. Not this time. She's changing. Each loop she seems older. Or something else. Her voice slips. Her face glitches. Once her shadow kept moving even when she didn't. Another time she showed me a drawing of me in a box with no doors. "You'll get it right eventually," she said. "Or you'll stay." I tried not doing anything. Just stayed in the living room, ignored her. That loop, around 6:30 p.m., she started crying without tears and whispering to something I couldn't see. I passed out before 8:43. When I woke up, there was a note in my pocket. Try harder. One loop, I asked what the best day ever actually meant. She looked up at me and said, "It means you'll want to stay forever." I've given her everything. Puppets, pancakes, new songs. I danced in the rain. I let her cut my hair once, thinking maybe it'd make her laugh. It did, for 5 minutes. Then bedtime came and she looked sad. "Almost," she said. That was loop 63, or 64. I've lost count. I haven't aged. My bruises reset. My scars disappear. But I remember every second. I don't know if this post will stay up when the loop resets. If you're reading this and this story sounds familiar, or if you've heard of a girl named Ellie who gets to keep people, please tell me what to do. I don't think I can make her happy, and I think the more I fail, the more she learns how to make me stay. Leah. Ding. My phone startled me out of my half-asleep, half-awake state as I lay on the couch with the TV droning on in the background. I read the text from an unknown number through blurry, weary eyes. This or that. Tea or coffee. The look of confusion I shot my phone for a split second before I put it down to some form of spam must have been hilarious. I flicked the ringer off and nodded back off only to be awoken a second time with that god-awful sound. Again, it was from the unknown number, and again, it was that same question. This was getting, well, odd. I, annoyed and increasingly tired, turned my phone off entirely, but before I could even close my eyes again, the ping rang through the speakers, and inexplicably those same words lit up the otherwise dark screen. How was I getting a text when my phone was off? I had enough. With my phone now switched back on, and my mind swirling, I typed out a paragraph of expletives before the urge to do something else took over. I decided to humor whoever this was. You want me to choose? Well, I'll choose, I mumbled to myself. I chose coffee, and promptly fell back asleep without a care as to whether my phone remained on or not. I struggled to put this any other way than bluntly, but the next morning, coffee no longer seemed to exist. I rolled out of bed and stumbled into the kitchen to start brewing so I could finish up whilst I brushed my teeth and showered, like I've done every morning for some time, and couldn't seem to find my treasured bag of grounds no matter where I looked. I get cranky when I'm without coffee, so I put it down to misplacing it and my still tired brain struggling to remember where, so decided to swing by my favorite coffee shop, Lucky's, on the way to work. I had the usual small talk with the server, who knew my order by heart at this point and proceeded to make the same old joke. The usual, please. He looked at me like I had two heads. I went to fill the awkward silence that followed when another text came through. Part of me knew what it would be before I even looked, but I hadn't yet put the pieces together, not until the stakes were raised. This or that, Luna or Soul. Knowing it was somehow able to keep pestering me regardless of my non-response, I chose this. I got home that day to find my puppy Luna had disappeared. There was no way out. No window to jump out of. No attic to hide in. Nothing. Her brother's Soul moped all evening. I never found her. By the time the next text came through, I was ruffling through cardboard boxes and head-height cabinets in my desperately futile attempts to find my dear baby. I refused to play along. I couldn't possibly convince anybody else. But those texts were emitting something badly wrong into the world, into my life, and as if in tune with my deepest thoughts, it knew I wouldn't play, because this text came with a warning. Mom or Dad, failure to choose immediately will result in a choice being made for you. I rationalized it, told myself I'd rather have a bad thing happen without my direct influence, even if said bad thing was something that made my stomach churn. So I never chose. Knowing what was coming, I called both of my parents minutes later in cold sweat brought on by fear and panic. The search party for Mom began a few days after she vanished. We never found her either. As I lay depressed, horrified and halfway through a bottle of whiskey on the same old couch earlier tonight, That familiar ping came through once again. This or that, spine or skull. Something has been whispering through the underside of my bedroom door ever since. I never chose. You left the utensil drawer open this morning, didn't you? She asked, stepping out of our bedroom as the late morning glow filled our kitchen. You slept in quite a bit, I spoke automatically, then paused to digest what she'd said. To my right were the kitchen counters forming an L shape into the corner. The cabinets, the doors, every drawer was closed. I frowned. Right. Earlier I was going to make eggs. I'd opened the utensil drawer for a spatula, then the fridge, and a cupboard. Was about to put the pan on the stove when something blunt poked my side. The utensil drawer. I'd forgotten to close it. Well, that's a pretty realistic dream, I told my wife. She stood there in the doorway, bathed in the sun, wearing only her pajamas. For the 14 years I've been married, my wife has never been a napper. Always says that if she's tired during the day, it means she's done a good job for making the day count. Always busy, running around, that one. Whether she's in front of the TV, not watching a movie, but following a workout routine to out-of-the-house grocery shopping, or staying late at the office, she's never sitting still. Yet here she is now, midday on a weekend, lying down on the couch. I'd been at the store earlier this Saturday, come home to her body curled up on the couch. Huh? I set the groceries down on the counter. Going into the living room, I shook her shoulder. She roused immediately, letting out a yawn. Huh? Oh, hey, sorry. I must have drifted off. She rubbed her eyes. I looked at the blanket over her legs and pillow under her head. I smiled. No worries. You've been working hard. I hardly saw you all week. She shook her head as if to say, it was just one of those weeks. When instead she blurted, the store was out of the bleach we use, eh? You've been going through it so fast lately. I froze. Looked at the counter, which was full of groceries. Though the bags were semi-transparent, there was no way she'd know. The rest of the weekend went by quickly. My wife napped on the couch, and I found myself catching up on some of my shows and games. I love my wife, but when she's around there's always something to be done. At least when she's asleep, she's not getting after me to get the brakes checked on the car, or vacuum the stairs, or remember to make dinner reservations for next week. How was work today? It was Monday evening, and we had just sat down for supper. Just a simple lasagna I'd heated in the oven. Barely a step above a TV dinner, but she didn't seem to mind. Oh, it was weirdly quiet, she replied. I even got a nap in during lunch. Really? You napped at work? I asked, incredulous. She scrunched her nose. Well, technically it was on my break, but yeah. She was about to scoop another bite into her mouth when she added, You've made too much food again. What? I looked down at my plate, finding it nearly empty. I looked back to her and she nodded towards the pan on the stove. The rest of the lasagna was still there. The exact amount remained from what I'd plated. I looked down again and found my plate empty. I looked back to my wife who, instead of elaborating, was getting up already, covering her plate with a napkin. It was lumpy, wasn't it? The napkin. There had to have been some scraps of food beneath it. So why? It was only 6 o'clock and she'd moved back onto the couch. Curled up her legs, resting her head on the pillow without a word. I didn't know whether to laugh or shout. In all our years of marriage, my wife has never, ever, just left the table still made. She's always doing the dishes right after eating. Has always said that if she didn't, they'd get left overnight and everything would be harder to clean in the morning. Just stay up for a bit longer, then you can go to bed early, I suggested. patting her on the shoulder. She didn't rouse, and I decided not to press her. I did the dishes myself that night. It was on the third week of these naps, these weird dreams, that I decided to stop trying to wake her from her naps. She stopped helping around the house. The floors stayed unswept. The vacuum collected dust. The pillows even started to smell. I didn't know what to do. Every time my wife woke from her naps, which was less and less, she'd say something I'd done while she'd been asleep. You left your work keys on the desk. You shouldn't have yelled at that intern today. He's just a kid. You made a big decision after work today, but you are glad you did what you did. You forgot to get gas. Been driving around more than usual. You really need to pay attention. You were so lost in thought today, you almost forgot about him. You made too much food again. You've started to fall back into old habits you thought you left behind. What's wrong with the bleach we use? Why do you suddenly look for the old kind your mother used? You forgot to call in sick to work today. You won't forget about me like the others. I sat up. I'm in bed. My hazed breathing permeates the everlasting silence that has seeped its way into the house. I look down to my left. My wife's spot. It's sullen, almost as if I can see the sunken shape of her body there. But when I move to feel her, I grasp nothing but sour air. The aroma of the house stopped being scented candles and fresh air weeks ago. In its place is... I'm not sure. I can't smell it anymore, but I think once it was dread. Can a smell be a feeling? It must be, because that's the only word that can describe such a thing. You won't forget about me. What? Swinging my legs over the side of the bed, I flick on the lamp. Wait, no. That's too bright. It'll wake her up. Quickly, I turn it off. I blink a few times, my eyes adjusting back to the dark. You won't forget about me. My legs are stiff and nothing wants to move. As I step into the living room, I catch a glance at myself in the full-length mirror outside the bedroom. I move, but that natural sway your arms do when you walk is gone. I can feel my eyelids begging to close for that millisecond it takes to blink, but it never happens. Into the living room I go, and my eyes shift to the couch. There's a lump there. She's breathing. Or is that those fuzzy things that dance in your sight when there's not enough light, giving the illusion of movement? I sit down at her feet, curled up under the blanket. Her head still rests on the pillow, yellowed and sour, and moving. That movement. It was the pillow, the blankets, not her. I dare not remove the blanket from her head. How she knew my intentions, I don't know. Maybe we are most awake when we are asleep. In truth, I don't know when she stopped recanting the past and started telling the future. I wonder if it matters, premonition or not. This was always going to happen when she started dreaming about things I've done. I smoothed the blanket atop sunken flesh. I'd buried so much within the confines of my memory, smoothed over by the fog of adolescence. This was one I wanted to remember. I won't forget about you. I needed to go for a walk that day. It didn't matter that I had been exhausted the day before. It didn't matter that I was supposed to have one of my friends over in a matter of hours. I needed to go on a walk that day. Lincoln Avenue. Just 2 words. That's all I could remember thinking. Lincoln Avenue. A completely random, inconsequential street name that I'm sure you could find in almost any state across the country. But when I woke up that morning, I couldn't think of anything but that one name. Lincoln Avenue. Like always, part of me just wanted to ignore it. To ignore the name and the voice that, for the moment, gently whispered it to me as though the voice was speaking from within my mind. If it was just for my sake, I would have. Please believe me when I say that. It wasn't just for my sake, though. My dad had been in the hospital for weeks prior for a head injury. I could still remember the call I'd gotten from my sister when it happened. "Dude, you need to get to Flower Hospital now." "Why? Finally decided to get that stick out of your..." "Just shut up and listen. Dad fell and hit his head. He must have been working on the roof or something." "What? I thought he was getting some contractors to work on that." "Well, apparently not, Dan. Get to the hospital now. They're taking him to the emergency room now." If past events were any indication, my dad's life depended entirely on what I did within the next 24 hours. I'd be lying if I said that he and I had the closest relationship even before the incident, let alone in the last 5 years since I'd moved out. I was sure in some way he still resented me for leaving, just as much as I still partly resented him for shutting down. Aside from the past few months, we'd barely even made any effort to repair our friendship, let alone what could be called a father-son relationship. But he was the only parent I had left, and we were finally starting to love each other again. I needed him. More than that, Kathy needed him. They'd been each other's rocks after everything happened, and I knew how badly it had affected all of us when Mom died. I couldn't afford to let myself or Kathy go through that again. On any other day, the weather outside would have been idyllic. I guess it still was. Blue skies, a breeze just gentle enough to keep me cool while the sun hung high above. Only a few small clouds peppering the expanse of blue, and a few birds singing their songs. It felt almost insulting, considering what was about to happen. As I took my first steps and passed the borders of my yard, I heard all the confirmation I needed to know that I was beyond the point of no return. The voice was whispering the street again. Lincoln Avenue. I had already walked about a mile when my phone began ringing again. Even without looking, I could almost guarantee that it was going to be Kathy again, calling for the 100th time to give me some update to Dad's condition. I didn't bother answering. I was in no mood to hear that things hadn't gotten any better, or worse, that he had gone fully unresponsive. The clock was already ticking. Seeing how fast it was winding down wouldn't change that. It wasn't a simple straight shot. At certain intervals, I could hear the voice calling out again, instructing me to go left or right, down paths I had driven past countless times, routes that I could drive in minutes or less, now passing by uncomfortably slow. Right, left, right, straight. Before I'd even realized it, an hour had passed, and I was trekking on the side of a busy street. Restaurants, stores, and a gas station littered either side of the road. Cars whizzed past me as the sidewalk became wider, and I was no longer the only pedestrian walking along it. Some walked dogs, others jogged, and others still casually walked along as they remained glued to their phones. None paid any mind to me. Out of sheer habit, I pulled my own phone out and checked my Steps app to see just how far I had gone. According to it, I had traveled only a little more than 3 miles. 3 miles. A little over an hour of walking. I wondered just how further I had to go. As it turned out, it wasn't much farther at all. I had been carefully checking each street sign I passed on my forced pilgrimage, hoping each time that the one I passed would be my ever-so-sought Lincoln Avenue. 2 hours in, I finally found it, just past an old apartment complex. The small green sign said in partially chopped lettering, Lincoln Avenue. My chest tightened as I read the name aloud. Doubts began to creep into my mind as I clenched my fist. Was I really doing this again? What if I was wrong? Maybe I was just going through some kind of waking nightmare, hearing things that weren't there. Lord knows, I hadn't been getting much sleep in the last few weeks. I remember reading in a medical report somewhere that the human mind begins to break down even after just 24 hours of not getting any sleep. and that there was potential of both visual and auditory hallucinations after 48. The same report claimed that while you could theoretically survive on just 4 hours of sleep for every 24, you could still feel the negative effects of sleep deprivation over an extended time. Maybe that included the aforementioned hallucinations. I couldn't remember the last time I'd slept more than 5 hours after Dad was admitted. Maybe that's all this was. 209 Lincoln Avenue, Red Roses. The voice was back and the illusion was shattered. I could justify hearing a random street like before. The name had to be common. This, however, was specific. An exact address, and based on the sound of it, something to identify the specific house I needed to go to. I still wanted to believe that this was just a bunch of hallucinations. I really did, but I could still remember the times I had done this before. What had happened the one time I refused? I could see Mom, shattered. Just... The street was like any other you drive by on the way to something actually significant. Rows upon rows of houses, a few small intersections making the various blocks, a mix of trimmed and not so trimmed grass, and the occasional tree in the front yard. The sky was blue, plenty of clouds. I could hear unseen birds singing their songs as what normally would be an idyllic, practically picturesque day moved along undisturbed. If I hadn't known any better, I may have stopped to enjoy a walk through the neighborhood. As it was, I couldn't enjoy my time here. I had work to do, and I just wanted it over with. To any unsuspecting eyes, which was realistically all of them, there was nothing interesting to see about me. A stranger passing by, maybe out getting some exercise in. Ideally, I would be so unremarkable that whoever lived here wouldn't even realize I had crossed paths with them. I would just be another nameless and blurry face, too unclear to even remember right. I would need that indifference. Each house I passed was mostly the same. Simple, 1 to 2 stories, a side driveway that fit multiple cars, and some variation of flowers. The neighborhood didn't look high-end, but it wasn't struggling either. Most of the houses had some variation of one person mowing their lawns, or otherwise doing yard work, or children running and playing while adults looked on. I felt the guilt of what was happening well up in me as some of the adults raised their hands in polite courtesy waves. Waves I had to fight myself to return. This was supposed to be a safe space, a place where families could enjoy their time together. And here I was, prowling like a lion seeking to tear it all apart. I'd long stopped trying to separate myself from the voice's consequences. There was no point to it. I may have abhorred the choices I made, and what they would lead to, but I made them regardless. All I could do was tell myself that my father was worth what was coming, that my sister was worth it, because I knew I wasn't. One by one I passed the houses, watching the numbers, noting the flowers. 199, pink lilies. 201, blue hydrangeas. 203, white orchids. 205, red spider lilies. 207, black roses. 209. Lincoln Avenue was like many of the houses I had passed, well kept, in good repair. A flower bed neatly tended to, red roses vibrant and almost seeming to sparkle in the sunlight. At the end of the street was a set of guardrails blocking off a small set of woods, just small enough that I could see through the cracks to an open field. My heart felt heavy enough to sink into my shoes as I observed the houses. It had been freshly painted, a chalk drawing of 2 large stick figures, and a third, smaller one smiled brightly in the driveway. What was I doing? I couldn't do this. I had to do this. I couldn't do this. I had to do this. Hey, buddy, can I help you? The voice wasn't in my head. It was right to the side of me. A man's voice. Turning to look at the man, I came face to face with a well-kept man in his mid-30s, maybe 10 years older than myself. He had short, neatly trimmed black hair with an equally maintained beard. He wore a plain, featureless t-shirt, and was carrying what looked to be a bag of groceries. "Restaurant, do it," the voice half instructed, half demanded. Its tone was different this time. Gone was the whisper, and in its place was an almost childlike eagerness. I recognized the tone immediately, and my stomach churned. "Oh, hey," I replied, feigning a confused expression as I looked from the house back to the man, a mix of impatience and frustration on his face. "I think I got turned around somewhere. I'm looking for that new steakhouse that was moved in a few weeks ago." I lied. Immediately the man's expression softened, and he even chuckled to himself as he shook his head. "Lincoln Steakhouse?" he asked. I nodded. "Yeah, you're not the first to have wound up here. You got a phone on you?" he asked, despite every bone in my body telling me to stop, to turn and run. I pulled my phone from my pocket, opened the GPS app, and handed it to the man. I watched as the man punched in some unknown address into my phone with his free hand, resisting every urge to snatch it away. I could practically hear the voice salivating in anticipation as the man handed my phone back to me. "There you go, man. Should be good to go now." I faked a laugh as I rubbed the back of my head. "Sorry about that. Didn't mean to intrude or anything." The man shook his head and waved the apology aside. "You're like the third guy that's happened to this month. Not a big deal." His guard was down. I could tell by his tone. It was now or never. "Dan," I said, introducing myself as I extended my hand. I prayed my hands weren't sweating, that my heart, beating like the stampede of 1,000 frightened animals, would hold out for just a few minutes longer, that my breath would not betray the anxiety in my soul. The man glanced with seeming amusement at my hand, then with a tired sigh took it. "Chuck," he offered kindly, shaking my hand. Chuck, my father's name. Of course, I thought. For a moment I wondered when he had become a father, if he too had an elder son, maybe a daughter on the way. How closely did his family mirror my own? I would never get the answers to those questions. Not that I deserve them anyway. As I released Chuck's hand, a pressure released in my head, like a congestion clearing after days of thickness. The voice was silent, gone. It was finished. "I hope you have a good rest of your day," I offered sheepishly. It was the first true thing I'd told Chuck since I'd met him. Save my name. Chuck merely gave a polite wave of the hand, then marched up his sidewalk and towards his door. I did not watch him enter. I did not linger to see what would happen. The walk home felt longer, more exhausting. A rational mind would have said it was due to how far I had already walked. A guilty one would say it was the shame of falling back into a hated habit. One I'd tried time and time again to shake, ever since that voice had become bound to me in that stupid childhood game so many years ago. The truth was probably somewhere in the middle, a mix of both physical and mental exhaustion. The sudden emptiness from the loss of the voice probably didn't help. For a moment, I hoped beyond practicality that the voice would stay gone this time, that Chuck would be its final victim, that just maybe, this time it would be satisfied. I didn't want the temptation anymore, or the fear of losing anyone else. I knew that's all it was, though. Just a hope. The voice always came back. Surely enough, just as I got home and opened my door, I felt a familiar, crippling weight seep into my head. I hurried and slammed the door closed and pinned my back against it, both ready and not ready for what came next. All around me I heard a sickening crunch, ripping and snapping. Phantom pains would flare in my own limbs for moments at a time, but never long enough to truly understand what he was going through. The voice moaned happily as it enjoyed its meal, either oblivious to my awareness or indifferent to it. I pictured Chuck playing with a little boy I had never seen, a wife I would never know. Tears welled in my eyes as I heard a series of pops, followed by a giddy laughter and more moaning. Even now I find myself hoping Chuck and all of my victims were already dead whenever this was happening. I could barely stand their fate as it was. To know they were alive during all this, that Mom was alive during it, I just couldn't handle it. I'm not sure how long I stayed there, curled up by the bed, rocking myself gently back and forth. Even after the noises stopped, I couldn't bring myself to move. Long after the light of day had stopped pouring into my home, leaving me shrouded in darkness, I was still there. I suppose I must have gotten up at some point, because the next thing I remembered was waking up in my own bed, window blinds open, still dark outside. Had I fallen asleep or simply been so out of it that I hadn't remembered going to the bedroom? A familiar ringtone snapped me out of my head. I looked beside my bed to the nightstand, my phone lighting up with Kathy's name identifying her as the caller. Though I suspected I already knew what the call was about, I answered anyway. I did the best I could to feign surprise as she told me Dad was making a recovery, that he was lucid. Just like always, the voice had kept its end of the deal, just like I feared it would, just like I knew it would. After a few minutes of conversation, I wished Kathy a good night. Another brief moment of sincerity. I wanted to be happy my father was alive, that Kathy would get to have him in her life for a while longer, that I would get the chance to fully reconcile our relationship, that we could be a family again. But the happiness was a shallow one, a drop in the proverbial hole that I hadn't stopped digging 14 years ago. How many bodies were in that hole now, I wondered. I desperately wanted to sleep. In my dreams I could forget what had happened, be blissfully unaware of everything, even if for a few hours. Instead I went to the internet, lying on my back as I searched for my most local news station. I wasn't sure why I was doing this. I already knew what I'd find. Maybe it was my own form of penance, my own way of forcing myself to acknowledge what I had really done. As the page loaded, I saw it. The top story. Local man found eviscerated in his home. Suspect currently unknown. When Robbie told me that he was into feet, I tried to be understanding. Believe me, I did, but I won't lie. I always found his attraction to them a bit strange. Robbie was never an overly sexual man. It wasn't until 3 months into our relationship that it even came up. I don't think he ever intended to tell me. Not with words, at least. I only found out because of what he did in my sleep one night. My eyes shot open, hazy vision dissipating as the darkness of my room gradually grew clearer. In my tired state, my first thought was to roll over and go back to sleep, until the covers jostled near the foot of the bed. My heart jackhammered in my chest as I turned to Robbie's pillow, expecting to find him sound asleep. But that's not what I saw. Robbie's side of the bed was empty. I shot up, my eyes wide as dinner plates. Right as I did, I felt it, a hand caressing my left foot. "Robbie, what are you doing to my feet?" My fear had melted away, and by that point I was more perplexed than anything. The sheets writhed, and I heard panicked rustling as Robbie struggled to fight his way from beneath the covers. I was asleep," he offered, his head poking meekly from under the blankets. I crossed my arms, despite the smile tugging at the corner of my lips. "Nice try, mister. You've got some explaining to do." And that's how I found out that my boyfriend is into feet. I'd be lying if I said that I didn't think Robbie's revelation was a little bit odd. Yes, I told him that I didn't, but I was just trying to be a supportive girlfriend. Even so, I determined that it wasn't a deal breaker. Robbie liked feet, so what? That just meant free foot massages, right? Wrong. Everything was fine until 3 nights later. Work had taken its toll on me, and unlike most people my age, instead of hitting the bars, I went to bed early. Robbie didn't join me right away. He'd opted to stay up a bit later watching Transformers. As I drifted off to sleep, I thought everything was fine. Little did I know that night would mark the beginning of a much bigger issue. For the second time that week, I awoke suddenly from a deep slumber, but unlike the previous nights, I could instantly tell that something was wrong. A searing pain jolted through my toes, shooting up my leg. It felt as if someone had jammed my big toe into a hydraulic press. "Ow, what the hell?" I shouted, reflexively kicking out. I heard a muffled groan from beneath the blankets. Robbie. This time I wasn't feeling as forgiving about being woken up by my boyfriend playing footsie in the middle of the night. "Robbie," I growled, turning on the lamp. "Yes?" he squeaked, emerging from beneath the covers. He stared at me like a wounded puppy. "What has gotten into you? I thought we agreed that you wouldn't wake me up like this anymore." He couldn't bring himself to look me in the eye. "I'm sorry, I just had an itch that I couldn't ignore. It won't happen again." "Whatever. We are going to have a serious talk about this in the morning." He didn't even say anything. He just slunk back to his place beside me, more dejected than I'd ever seen him. Robbie and I did have that talk the following morning, and he admitted to being in the wrong. He repeatedly assured me that it was a one-time thing, and that going forward he'd ask for permission every single time. That helped to put my mind at ease, but even so, my gut told me that something was off. Like Robbie was hiding a dirty secret that he didn't want me to know about. The next night we were together, we stayed at his house. When he went to take a shower, I decided to snoop. I didn't know what Robbie was keeping from me, but I was curious to see what I could find. Yeah, I know. I shouldn't have done that. I'm fully aware that it was an invasion of his privacy, but what I discovered has made all of it feel justified. When rummaging through Robbie's bedside drawer, I found what appeared to be a journal. Bingo. That was exactly the kind of thing I needed. I wasn't expecting much, but when I flipped it open and read the title of the first page, my blood turned to ice. Skinning Skylar, Experiment Log. Surely that didn't mean what I thought it did. It couldn't, right? I continued to read. I had to know. 5/4/25. I applied only a dollop of the numbing agent tonight. No luck. She caught me in the act. I'll try again tomorrow if I can. 5/6/25. The lick test succeeded. She didn't notice. Next time, I'm going to give her a bite. 5/7/25. I bit down hard on her foot 4 times tonight. She woke up, but she only felt it in her toes. I think, based on her reaction, I can't be sure though. Note: apply more numbing serum next time. I had to pause what I was reading. I nearly vomited all over Robbie's bed. Whatever sick experiment he was running, I wanted no part of it. Though I really didn't want to. I forced myself to continue, solely to find out how much danger I was in. What I read next will haunt me for the rest of my life. 5/10/25. Tonight is the night. I'm going to try cutting her foot open with a scalpel. I think I have a good idea of how much of the numbing agent to use now. I'm going to inject her with the heavy stuff too, for good measure. If everything goes smoothly, I'll be one of the first men to skin a human alive in modern times. I don't anticipate that she'll live for more than 3 hours afterward. I'll update when I can. Skylar, why do you have that? Robbie's face was white as a ghost. He stood in the doorway, hair still wet. The water dripping onto the tiles served as the only sound in the silence that ensued. What is this? Robbie stomped over to me. Panic scrawled across his features. It's mine, that's what it is, he snapped, snatching the journal from my hands. How much did you read? I didn't answer. My brain had already resorted to fight or flight mode. I scooped up my phone from the bed and leapt off the other side, darting toward the bathroom. Robbie was standing between me and the exit, leaving that as my only option. He tried to catch my arm as I passed, but he was too slow. I locked the door behind me and I instantly heard him pounding on the other side, begging for me to let him explain. I didn't listen. I immediately called the cops. The entire time Robbie pleaded with me to come out. He swore up and down that the notebook was just a sick fantasy, that he'd never act on his impulses. His words meant nothing to me. I'd seen enough. The police couldn't do anything. Go figure. Robbie would have needed to hurt me for them to take action, and the chances of getting him thrown in the slammer for biting my foot a few nights prior were practically zero. So I did the only thing I could do. I left him, blocked his number, and tried to move on with my life the best I could. It wasn't easy, but after a month, I was starting to heal. Until I found the letter on my kitchen counter. I was petrified when I saw it lying there. No one else had access to my house. I had the only spare key, and I lived alone. With trembling hands, I picked up the note, fear raking at my insides. What was written on that scrap of paper has me terrified for my life. Dearest Skylar, I've decided that I need a bit more practice in order to conduct my experiments on a live subject. Your lifeless corpse should do just fine. I'll see you soon. It was late September when I had returned home. I had just come back from a summer camp that lasted 2 months. I couldn't tell you much about the camp or its counselors. I know I had a good time, except when I got lost during a group nature hike. When I was finally able to find my way back to camp, it was late and no one was in camp. When I returned home, my parents were surprised to see me. Max, you're home? My mother asked. She slowly approached me and looked me up and down. She then dropped to her knees and hugged me. I could see my father standing in the doorway looking at both of us. He swiftly turned and locked himself in the den. He must have still been angry with me. Before summer camp, I had broken into his gun cabinet with some friends from school. My friend Benny accidentally pulled the trigger of one of the guns and shot a hole in the wall. No one was hurt, but my friends scattered, leaving me with the smoking gun. When my dad found out what had happened, I got the lecture of a lifetime. Do you have any idea how stupid that was? You're extremely lucky no one was hurt, he scolded. I'd ground you, but I'm glad you'll be out of my sight for the next 2 months. He then kicked me out of the den and sent me to my room without dinner. A knock at my door startled me as I was looking at some magazines Benny had snuck me during class. I opened the door to see my sister, Riley, standing there with a plate of food. Mom said to sneak you a plate, she said, pushing the plate into my chest. She was taller than me, but I would assume her big, colorful hair that reeked of hairspray helped to contribute to her height. I looked her up and down, seeing her wearing her jean jacket vest with her Black Sabbath shirt underneath. Her neck was weighed down by the several necklaces she frequently wore. Are you going out? I had asked. No, twerp. I just dressed this way and put on war paint before I go to La La Land. She sneered. Do Mom and Dad know? I asked, chewing through some broccoli. They don't, and you better not tell them either, she whispered. Or I'll tell Mom about your nudie megs, you little perv. She had me dead to rights. I nodded, agreeing to keep my mouth shut. Later that night, after my parents went to bed, I heard the window open from Riley's room. I went back to bed. The next morning I came down for breakfast. Pancakes, eggs, and bacon, a weekend staple for my family. My dad already sat at the table, coffee in front of him, his nose in the paper. He never said a word to anyone until his second cup of coffee, but today he was extra silent. Must still be angry with me. Riley didn't come down for breakfast. Normal for nights she sneaks out. "Are you excited about going to summer camp, sweetie?" my mom had asked. I nodded as I stuffed my face with bacon. "Will your friend Benny be there with us?" she asked, putting down a plate of food for my dad. "No, he ended up getting summer school," I said, looking back at my mom. I could hear my father scoff from behind his paper. He never liked Benny, said he was a bad influence. It wasn't until the early afternoon when Riley finally came downstairs, still wearing her black Sabbath shirt from last night. Her hair was a mess, and her makeup mostly cleaned off with the slightest hint of eyeliner. She shot me a look as she grabbed a plate covered in plastic wrap from inside the microwave. She then sat down next to me on the couch and watched cartoons with me. "What time are you supposed to be leaving?" she asked. I think 2 p.m., I answered, not entirely sure. "What's the name of the camp?" she asked. Camp Monetary, I think it's called," I answered. "Oh, that's in Sleepy Falls. I remember we went there once as a family vacation. You were like 2 years old when we went. It was a weird place," she said. "Weird how?" I questioned. "I don't know. I just remember something not right about the place. Maybe it was just because I was 7 at the time. The world seems a lot bigger and stranger when you're a kid." She laughed. "You're still a kid?" I quipped. Yeah, I graduate next year, and I'll likely be moving away for college. Mom will be devastated. Look out for her, okay?" she said, ruffling up my brown curls with her fingers. I could smell the faint scent of cigarettes stained on her fingers. I tried cigarettes once with Benny. I felt like the inside of my throat was being punched by a fist that was on fire. It was about 2:14 p.m. when a bus pulled up to the house with Camp Monetary written on the side of it. I hugged my sister, and my mom kissed the top of my head. My dad was there to see me off, but he didn't say anything. Didn't even shake my hand like he normally would do whenever I went somewhere for a long time. It was about a 4-hour drive until we reached the small town of Sleepy Falls. The bus weaved through the winding streets of the market district of the town. The townspeople all would come out of the shops to see the bus drive by. None of them waved or smiled. They just looked at us. When we reached the tree line for the forest, it was another 20 minutes until we reached the camp. The counselors greeted us at the bunkhouses and commanded us to gather our belongings and head to our designated bunks. The first few days at camp were mostly just a tour of the camp. It had a lake with boats and fishing, various tables for eating and crafts, an archery area, a go-kart track, and a garden. There was a hiking trail that would lead deeper into the forest. By the 4th night, the counselors sat us by a fire to share ghost stories. "Miss Keene, could you tell us about how the camp got its name?" one kid asked. The young counselor, known as Miss Keene, was only a few years older than my own sister, with straight red hair that was pulled back into a ponytail. "Of course. So the town of Sleepy Falls was founded by European settlers in the 15th century. There was a local legend about a forest guardian, known as the Monetary, that would stalk the forest and abduct those who wandered into the woods. No one knows if this legend was brought over by the European settlers, or if it was a story created by the local tribes. Some say it's some sort of fae. Others say it's a spirit," she explained. I raised my hand to gain an answer to the question that began to swell my brain. "Yes, Max, was it?" she said, pointing at me. "Why would they name the camp after a monster that abducts people?" I asked. I believe it was in honor of the creature's benevolent behavior as a protector of the forest, she answered. Now, how would you all like to hear the story of the horseman from hell? She asked. The kids cheered, ready for the next scary story. I didn't pay much attention for the rest of the night. When we all turned in for bed, I just thought about how much I already missed home. My mom, Riley, even my dad. The next couple of months were just regularly scheduled events. A couple of weeks before the end of camp, Miss Keene became sick. She stayed in her bunkhouse most days, only occasionally being seen from her window, watching us play. Eventually, we stopped seeing her. I asked another counselor what had happened to her. Oh, Miss Keene? We had to send her to the hospital. She was really sick and not getting any better, he answered. Will she be back before the end of camp? I asked. No, maybe next year, he answered. Hey, no more questions. Let's get ready for one of our last nature hikes, he said. The hike was like all the others. Same trail, same trees, same plants. During the hike, I started to lag behind a bit, daydreaming about what happened to Miss Keene, and thinking about how by the end of the week, I'll be back home. I hope my dad isn't still mad at me. Max. A voice reached out from behind a tree. I stopped in my tracks looking around, but I didn't see anyone. Max, the voice said again. I recognized that voice, even though I hadn't heard it in 3 weeks. It was Miss Keene. Miss Keene, is that you? I asked. Please help me. You don't have to do this, Miss Keene said. Please follow me, children, she called to me. Guys, hey, I found Miss Keene. I think she's hurt. I yelled to the group ahead of me, but they didn't hear me. I decided to follow the voice to find Miss Keene. If she was hurt, I could help her using the first aid skills I learned from one of the camp events. I followed the voice further into the forest, further away from the trail. Before I knew it, I got turned around. I was lost. I never found Miss Keene. I decided to backtrack the best I could back to the camp. Somehow, some way, I made it back. I was still being embraced by my mother. She was crying on my shoulder. I could feel her hot breath from her wails against me, her tears slowly dripping into my shirt. From the den, I heard a loud pop sound. It was a similar sound to when Benny accidentally shot the gun in there months ago, just more muffled. I could hear rumbling coming from the stairs as Riley came running down there. What happened? She cried. She came and stopped in the doorway as soon as she saw me. Riley? I said as I pulled myself away from my mother's grasp. She collapsed to her hands and knees as she cried even harder into the tile. What the... She screamed as she turned around and ran back upstairs and slammed her bedroom door. I walked over to the phone on the wall and picked it up and listened. I could hear Riley's ragged breath, her trying to hold back tears. 911, what is your emergency? A voice asked. Hello? Please send help. I'm at 3232 West Holly Lane, she said desperately. What is happening there? The operator asked. It's my brother. He's downstairs with my mother. I think my father shot himself, she cried. Your father shot himself? Okay, we'll send a cruiser and an ambulance your way, the operator said. No, that's not it. My brother disappeared a month ago at summer camp. They found his body in the woods. We buried him last week. That thing downstairs is not my brother, she screamed, her voice finally breaking down in cries of both sadness and fear. I didn't believe in any of it. Not really. Demons, rituals, salt circles, all that stuff just felt like folklore. Old cautionary tales wrapped in mystery. That's probably why we laughed when Dev pulled out that weird old book. It was Friday night. Me, Dev, Jay, and Alina were hanging out at Jay's house. His parents were away for the weekend, and we were deep into one of those nothing nights. Lazy, tired, half buzzed, half bored. Dev had been digging through a box of his dad's things in the basement when he found it. This heavy, leather-bound book with cracking edges, and pages that looked like they'd been stained by time, or something else. The title said, "The Lesser Key of Solomon." Most of it looked like junk, faded Latin, weird symbols, dramatic warnings, but Dev turned to one of the marked pages, finger-tapping an underlined name. "Orobus," he said. "Says here he tells the truth, protects people, one of the good ones." Jay laughed. "A chill demon? You gotta be kidding me." Alina rolled her eyes, already over it. I don't know what made me say it. Was it boredom, too much beer, or sheer curiosity, but I said, "Let's summon him." We weren't being serious. It was just something dumb to kill the time, get some laughs, maybe get a few clips to post later. We lit a few tea candles from the junk drawer, sat in a circle on the cold concrete floor, and Dev read the words out loud. We skipped most of the steps. We couldn't be asked to go through all that and waste time. No protective circle, no fancy herbs or incense, just candlelight and bad decisions. And nothing happened. That just made us laugh harder. It was fun. We bashed each other, tried to scare each other a bit, and ultimately shrugged it off and went to play Mario Kart. But after about 20 minutes, the basement door creaked open. Jay swore he'd shut it tight, but those doors were iffy. He went and locked it. We still got some laughs, saying that maybe the chant succeeded. Then we heard a soft knock upstairs. Just once. Soft enough to not be intrusive, but sharp enough to stop our talking. Then came the sound of a pan hitting the floor in the kitchen. Jay went up to check, came back frowning. The pan wasn't even near the edge. It was pushed off. Probably the cat. I remember Alina saying something like, "Must have been the draft," but I wasn't convinced. The air felt heavier, not cold exactly, just wrong. I didn't feel at ease anymore. Something felt off. Then something slammed into the wall behind us, loud, deliberate, hard. We all jumped, even Dev looked rattled, and he was the one that didn't get pushed off the rails easily. I saw that he looked freaked out, terrified at this point. He grabbed the book again and started reading more clearly. His brow furrowed, and the rest now realized this wasn't a prank anymore. Orobus, if summoned without circle or seal, may wander freely, though not of harm by hand. He grows stronger through fear and time. He may torment, mislead, and draw harm from the world to you, to reveal the truth. At the final hour, when shadow becomes flesh, he may touch. He may take. Protection lies in circles of salt and in the light. He cannot cross either unless broken. If he does not possess a soul until daybreak, he shall return to his realm. Jay's laugh came out sharp and short. Nice, real funny. Then we all heard it, breathing, right next to my ear. Cold, uneasy, and damp, and very much there. I freaked out, turned, expecting something, someone, anything. Dev's voice cracked when he shouted, "We didn't bind it. It says right here, no binding, no control." More noises upstairs. Then a bulb popped in the stairwell. Alina screamed. Jay cursed. I didn't say anything. I was trying not to lose it. We scrambled. Dev tried Googling binding rituals. Yes, funny, but not so funny when we faced something we didn't understand. This was supposed to be fun, a joke. We realized all too late that it wasn't. I ran upstairs and grabbed a bag of salt and we poured it around us in a shaky ring, all of us standing close now, barely speaking, undecided if we should watch around us or each other. Then the light started dying. One bulb, then another, then another. Pop, pop, pop. Always just outside the circle. The darkness was creeping closer with each pop. We knew we were in real danger now. I held up my phone's flashlight. It flickered, but the battery was full. It shouldn't have. Dev read again, barely above a whisper. He may not touch the soul unless it slips from light into dark, or into dream. Don't fall asleep, Alina said, and her voice broke halfway through. I don't think that'll be a problem, Dev said. Doubt anyone could sleep. It was now 4:25 a.m., and we just had to make it until sunrise. Time went slow, but it moved. The next hour, I don't even know how to describe it right. There were scratching sounds. Not constant, just enough to keep you from forgetting. A chair skidded across the floor by itself. Something moved in the corner just outside the light, but when I looked, it wasn't there. Not gone, just wasn't. Then something happened that made us aware we were indeed not safe. The gas. It hit all at once, sharp, sour. Alina started coughing. The burner upstairs, someone had turned it on, but we'd all been downstairs. We didn't want to leave the salt circle, but we couldn't just sit there and let the house fill with gas. We decided to go up together slowly. One person always shining the light on the others, like kids playing flashlight tag in a haunted house. The burner was on full blast. The knob was gone, yanked off. Jay found the valve under the counter, turned it off with pliers. I took the handle, shoved it into my hoodie pocket. Then the phone lights flickered again. We ran like hell. We held a grip on each other, and we just ran. Back into the basement, into the salt. We didn't talk anymore. We just breathed, shaky and quiet. I remember looking out the small basement window and seeing the sky start to get that weird bluish gray. Just barely. Just enough to believe it might end. It might be over. Everything was silent. No more noise, no more draft. Nothing moved. Everything was peaceful. Just that nice warm feeling of first sun rays on the skin. That sunrise came slow. It always does when you're watching it. When it finally did, I felt like I'd been holding my breath for hours. Alina stood up stiff. It's over, right? Dev was still sitting there. He hadn't said much in a while. Then suddenly he stood up. I'm going home, he said. What? No, wait, Dev. I'm tired, he said. I just want to sleep. He said something else under his breath. I didn't hear it, but Jay froze. What did you say? Dev looked confused. Nothing. Good night. We didn't follow. We started cleaning. We had a lot to clean. The mess, candles, broken lights, the salt circle. Just trying to return the room to something normal. Then Jay said quietly, The circle. We turned. He was just staring at the floor. There was a break. A line in the salt where someone had stepped in too fast. A single heel mark that had smeared the edge. A gap. And Dev had been sitting right near that spot. We just stared at it, didn't speak, didn't clean it, didn't want to admit it was there, and Dev hasn't answered any of our calls since. We keep telling ourselves he just needed space, that he walked out that morning and went home, but none of us actually saw him leave. We just remember the sound of the door, and when I think back to that moment, I can't shake this feeling. What if Dev never made it out of that basement? What if we let something else walk away? Hello, my friends. I'm not really sure how to get started, but I had something exceptionally bizarre happen to me. I've told a few people in my life, and usually the response I get is something along the lines of, "That's pretty frickin' wild," or, "Oh, okay." Anyway, I'm not really sure what to do with this experience. You see movies or read stories and expect a payoff or crescendo or something of that nature whenever something big happens. But real life has a way of not caring for your resolution. Anyway, I apologize for rambling, and I will just get started. My story begins when I was 19 years old. Just a kid, really, doing dumb stuff that kids do. I had this neighbor, Mr. Onyx Dragons. He had a really cool name. I remember thinking it was the coolest name I'd ever heard. Unfortunately, Mr. Onyx Dragons was just a regular old man. He didn't do anything out of the ordinary, didn't look or act strange. He didn't seem to be hiding any secrets, no matter how much I wanted him to contain some mystery. So when he passed away, it was just as uninteresting as he was. It was sad and unfortunate. He had gone to the hospital and had pneumonia and simply died. I learned about it from my dad, who knew him a bit better than I did. No cool death or anything else that I am shallow enough to imagine. I remember feeling really bad when I caught myself thinking, imagine having such a cool last name and utterly wasting it on being boring. It was a weird fixation, I know, and for what it's worth, I felt like a piece of crap for even thinking it. Months went by after his death, and I assumed that he would have just had someone come by to clean it out. Family or the government or whoever. But no one ever did. The house just sat there. The lawn remained maintained. Everything looked in order. I had no idea who was taking care of the house, but someone was. The strange thing, though, is that I never saw anybody there. Believe me, I kept an eye out for it, too. One day I decided enough was enough. For no particular reason, I decided to break into his house. I don't really know why I did. I suppose it just bothered me the way it sat there seemingly frozen in time. The truth is, he bothered me, despite the irrationality of it. I could not stop thinking about him. How is your name Stormhawk Umber Onyx Dragons, and you don't have any sort of interesting qualities to you? I feel like my parents had given me such a name. I would either feel compelled to do something crazy like becoming a Navy SEAL or something awesome. I feel crazy to even acknowledge how much it bothers me. I know it's silly. Anyway, breaking in was easy enough. I didn't even have to break anything really. I simply went around the back of his house, found a window that was unlocked. I managed to open it and crawl inside. I broke in during the day when everyone was at work, and I didn't want to use any unnecessary electricity or anything. I didn't know if the electric company would notice and investigate or not. Upon entering his house, I landed in what looked like a regular living room. I got up and began looking around. Much to my great disappointment, his house was as boring as he was. In fact, even so much to the point that his house was unsettling in a weird way. Everything was too nice, like it was a life-size dollhouse. Everything looked like it was just a large toy version of whatever it was supposed to be. I approached the couch that I would have sworn was made of plastic by looking at it, but when I approached it and touched it, the strangest dissonance came over me. It was the most comfortable couch I'd ever felt in my life. Somehow the disconnect was enough to jar me, but not deter me. I began searching his drawers and whatnot, but strangely enough, everything was empty. No drawer or cabinet had a single thing. No dishware, no random odds and ends that seemed to pile up in drawers. All of the books were solid objects. They didn't even open. They were just decorations. I was so confused at what this was that I didn't even know how to feel. Creeped out? Interested? Even now I'm still not sure which. I thought maybe I should leave, but I also figured that I was just being paranoid. What in the world could plastic do to me? As I picked up one of the plastic books to return it to its spot, the strangest thing happened. It was so subtle I didn't even really register it at the time. I felt a sense of accomplishment, similar to when you finish reading a book. I caught myself thinking about the premise of The Old Man and the Sea, the struggle that ends in futility, but then I remembered I'd never read that book. I shivered and shrugged it off, probably just some lecture I had heard at school or something. After wandering around a bit more in this strange dollhouse, I made my way to the basement. Not sure what I was expecting to find, but I had a morbid curiosity. So I descended the stairs. When I reached the bottom, to my surprise, I found an elaborate mirror maze. A million me's reflected in every direction. As I was walking through the maze, I could not shake this overwhelming feeling of being watched, but every time I tried to look to where I felt the eyes, I'd see only an infinitude of myself peering back into me. To this day, I still get the chills thinking about that. However, after navigating for a while by tracking the floor, I managed to make it to the other side of the maze. What I found was odd, but at this point I wasn't surprised. It was one of those big doors on a submarine, the one with the spinny wheel. I opened it to see what was on the other side. I really wish I hadn't. Inside there was a massive, an impossibly large ballroom. It looked like it was from the 1950s, with posh design, velvet, and mahogany, I think. I'm not really familiar with the minutiae of fancy decor, but this was that, and then some. In the background, a phonograph playing music. It was scratchy and skipping every so often. It was the perfect blend of post-war hope and the decaying dread of a dream gone by. This isn't what unsettled me the most, though. On the floor through the ballroom, there were all of these metal tracks. They were all over the place. Upon the tracks, moving and zipping around, were all dressed mannequins, moving from here to there, an emulation of dancing and mingling, a frozen, mobile mimic of movement. There were easily 50 of them, all of them following the tracks in different ways to different points, like a bastardized recreation of a party by someone who had never met a human. In the middle of the hall there was a large table. I thought to leave, but upon turning around I saw the mirror maze, a legion of myself bidding me to stay where I am. I couldn't resist. When I looked back into the ballroom, I had found that just for a brief moment all of the mannequins had stopped, and all of their heads were turned to look at me, regardless of the position of their body, but just for a moment, soon after they began zipping back and forth. I made my way to the banquet table and saw a card that had a name on it. It was my name. I sat down at the head of the table. There was a platter in front of me. When I lifted it off, I was greeted by the ripe aroma of rotten meat and turned dairy. A large buffet of rot waiting to be eaten. I tried to get up, to recoil in disgust, but I couldn't. I don't know how I knew, but I knew the mannequins would never forgive me if I didn't partake. So I did. With one rotten bite I began, then another and another still. Each bite seemingly restoring the food, undoing the rot. As I kept eating, I noticed more and more that the mannequins were no longer just mannequins. They were coming to life. I continued to eat my delicious meal. By the time I was nearly completed, I looked around to the men and women surrounding me, enjoying themselves at my party. Just as my plate ran out of food, a kind waiter approached me and asked politely, "Would you care for some more food, or perhaps a glass of wine?" I replied that I would like both, and the waiter replied with a smile, "Indeed, right away, Mr. Onyx Dragons." And I decided to dance.